Hunger lived everywhere in the village. It clung to the cracked mud walls, hid in the dry wind, and followed people like a shadow that never left. The ground was hard and tired, as if it had given all it could and had nothing more to offer. Even the sun felt cruel, burning down without mercy, watching children grow thin before their time. The boy was one of them. He woke each morning with the same pain twisting inside his stomach. It was not a sharp pain anymore. It was dull, constant, and heavy like a stone placed inside him. Hunger had become a part of his body, something he carried the way others carried breath. He did not cry from it. Crying wasted energy. Instead, he learned to move slowly, carefully, saving every bit of strength he had. He lived alone in a broken hut at the edge of the village. The roof leaked when it rained. The floor was bare earth, cold at night and burning hot during the day. People passed by his home without looking. Some pretended not to see him. Others saw him but chose to forget. He was poor, and in this place poverty made you invisible. The boy did small jobs when he could, carrying water, sweeping yards, helping older men with heavy loads. Most days he was paid with nothing. Some days with words that cut deeper than hunger. And on rare days he was given food. Those days felt like miracles. Food was never just food to him. It was hope. It was survival. It was proof that tomorrow might still come. Every bite mattered. Every crumb was precious. He ate slowly, always afraid the meal would end too soon. Even when his stomach burned with need, he forced himself to chew carefully, as if respect might make the food last longer. At night, when the village grew quiet, the boy lay awake listening to his own breath. His thoughts drifted to memories he barely understood, soft voices calling his name in dreams, voices that felt older than time. Sometimes he dreamed of standing beside a river that glowed under moonlight, while shadows watched from the trees. Other times, he dreamed of hands reaching toward him, rough and gentle at the same time, guiding him forward without words. He never spoke of these dreams. Who would listen? Once, an old woman passed him on the road and stopped suddenly. She stared at him with wide eyes as if seeing something behind his face. Her lips moved, whispering words he could not hear. Then she stepped back, crossed herself, and walked away quickly. The boy stood frozen, his heart pounding, unsure why fear had filled her eyes. Small things like that happened often. Too often to be chance. Birds sometimes followed him when he walked alone. The wind would shift suddenly when he was near. Stones warmed under his feet even when the ground was cold. He noticed these things but said nothing. He had learned that silence kept him safe. Despite everything, the boy carried a quiet strength inside him. He did not steal even when hunger screamed. He did not curse the world even when it seemed to have cursed him first. When he saw others suffer, he felt their pain deeply as if it belonged to him too. But kindness did not fill an empty stomach. One evening, after a long day without food, the boy sat alone outside his hut. The sky burned red as the sun fell, and smoke from distant cooking fires filled the air. The smell made his stomach tighten painfully. He watched families gather, bowls in their hands, laughter rising with the smoke. He swallowed hard and looked down at his thin arms. Just one meal, he thought. Just one. That night, desperation settled over him like a heavy blanket. He felt small, forgotten, and dangerously close to breaking. His dreams came early, dark and restless. In them the river returned, but this time, something shone beneath the water, waiting. When he woke before dawn, his hunger was worse than ever. And somewhere beyond his understanding, destiny was already moving toward him. The morning was cold and gray. The boy's stomach ached with the same dull emptiness that had become part of him. He walked along the dirt path, his bare feet scraping against stones and dust. The village was waking slowly, smoke rising from small fires, and the faint clatter of pots and pans breaking the silence. Hunger made each step heavier, as if the world itself resisted him. He had heard that a woman at the market was giving leftover porridge to children who had nothing to eat. Normally he would have felt shame. Hunger brought humility, but this morning, desperation pushed him forward. Every thought in his head repeated the same silent plea, just one meal, just one meal. By the time he reached her small stall, the woman was already serving a few children. He waited at the edge, his eyes fixed on the steaming bowls. When she finally noticed him, she frowned, scrutinizing him as if he might vanish at any moment. "You've come late," she said, her voice sharp but not cruel. "There's barely enough." He nodded, swallowing hard. Shame rolled over him like a wave. He hated asking for food, hated standing there empty-handed while others received what he longed for. But hunger was louder than pride. The woman handed him a small bowl. The porridge was thin and watery, far less than what the others had, but it smelled warm and filling. He gripped it tightly, afraid to spill a single drop. Gratitude and embarrassment battled inside him. "Thank you," he thought silently, even as his cheeks burned. He sat on the edge of the dirt road, far enough from the other children to be alone. Each spoonful was precious. Each bite felt like a promise he barely dared to believe. He closed his eyes and savored it slowly, almost ceremoniously, as though this simple act of eating might be the only magic left in the world. Then something strange happened. As he stirred the porridge with the wooden spoon, something hard scraped against the bowl. He froze, heart hammering. He dipped his fingers carefully, feeling around, and then lifted a small, round object. At first he thought it was a stone, perhaps an accident. But as he held it in his palm, he realized it was a ring. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The metal shimmered faintly even in the dull morning light, worn but intricate. Tiny symbols were etched along its band, twisting and curling in ways that seemed alive. The ring felt heavy, not in weight but in presence. It hummed in his hand, a quiet vibration that made his skin tingle. He almost dropped it, fear striking him like lightning. This was no ordinary ring. He knew it instinctively. His mind raced. How had it gotten there? Why him? He looked around quickly, half expecting someone to leap out and claim it, or worse, to scold him for touching what was not his. But the street was empty. Only the smoke and the distant sounds of the village remained. He turned the ring over in his hand, every symbol catching the light. Something about it felt old. Very old. Ancient, almost sacred. It carried a weight of history he could not understand, yet he sensed its power deeply. He pressed it against his forehead and then against his chest, hoping for an answer that did not come. Fear and confusion churned inside him. A part of him wanted to throw the ring away, to pretend this moment had never happened. But another part, a part he could not ignore, told him that this was no accident. The ring had chosen him, whether he wanted it or not. He glanced back at the woman who had given him the porridge. She was busy with other children, unaware of the extraordinary event that had just unfolded. A shiver ran down his spine. Was she involved? Was this some strange trick? He did not dare ask. His hand shook as he held the ring. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Hunger, fatigue, and fear collided inside him. The warmth of the porridge seemed distant now, almost insignificant. He had discovered something far greater than a simple meal, something that might change everything, though he did not yet understand how or why. The boy studied the ring in silence, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon him. He could sense the air around him shifting slightly, like the world itself was holding its breath. Leaves rustled in the wind, but there was no wind. Birds perched on nearby rooftops remained perfectly still, their eyes fixed on him. For a moment, he felt as if the village, the very earth beneath him, was aware of what he held. His heart pounded in his chest. He was terrified, yet a spark of awe ignited within him. This simple, ordinary morning, the hunger, the shame, the struggle for a meal, had become something extraordinary. He did not know what would come next. He did not yet know what the ring meant, or why it had appeared in his life. All he knew was that his life had changed forever. And deep inside, beneath the fear and confusion, he felt the first trembling pulse of destiny. Something ancient, unseen, and powerful had chosen him. The boy clutched the ring to his chest and whispered to himself, though no words came out. The world felt vast, dangerous, and alive in a way it never had before. And in that moment he realized he would never be the same again. The ring did not leave his hand. Even when he tried to set it down on the rough wooden table in his hut, it seemed to hum faintly, as if whispering for him to hold it closer. At first he thought he imagined it, his hunger, his exhaustion, his fear making him see magic where there was none. But the sensation persisted. It was real. He turned it over in his fingers again and again, tracing the tiny symbols etched into the band. They felt alive, like they were breathing under his touch. The boy's heart raced. Could a simple ring truly carry such power? Could it really be calling to him? Sleep that night was uneasy. Every shadow in the hut stretched longer than it should. The wind outside moaned like a lonely spirit, and he felt certain he was not alone. In his dreams, he walked through forests where the leaves glowed faintly and the air shimmered. Shapes moved at the edges of his vision, tall, silent figures watching, waiting, judging. He woke suddenly, clutching the ring to his chest, sweat cold on his skin. The next morning, strange things began to happen. He noticed it first while walking through the village. A flock of birds circled above, but instead of flying away when he approached, they followed him, their wings beating in rhythm with his heart. The wind shifted softly, nudging his hair and clothes in ways that felt almost deliberate. Even the animals, the goats and chickens in the market, stopped their noisy squabbles when he came near. Fear and wonder battled inside him. He wanted to tell someone, to ask if they saw what he saw. But who would believe him? Who could understand that a simple ring found by chance could make the world itself respond? He tried to ignore it. He placed the ring in a small cloth and hid it under a loose floorboard. But no matter what he did, his hand would creep back to it, his fingers itching for the warmth and hum it offered. It was as if the ring had grown roots into him, into his very being. One evening he sat by the river trying to make sense of it all. The water moved slowly, reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. He placed the ring on a flat stone and stepped back. The stone began to shimmer faintly. Tiny ripples spread across the water, even though he had not touched it. His breath caught in his throat. The ring reacted to him. He was certain of it now. Fear rose like a storm inside him. He wanted to run, to escape, to be just a poor boy again with empty hands and a quiet life. But the pull was stronger than fear. The ring's presence demanded attention, demanded recognition. It whispered of something more, something he could not yet see. He began to notice small visions. When he closed his eyes, he saw fleeting images of people he had never met. A woman standing in a firelit hut, clutching a baby to her chest. A man kneeling alone, his face streaked with tears. Children playing in a field that stretched endlessly, laughing as if the sky itself smiled. Each vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving him trembling and unsure whether he had imagined it. Even in the daylight there were signs. Flowers along the road seemed to lean toward him. Shadows shifted in unnatural ways, stretching toward his steps and receding again. It was as if the world itself knew him, as if the earth recognized something in him that he did not yet understand. The boy began to feel eyes on him, though no one was there. Not human eyes, at least. Something unseen watched from the edges of his vision, following silently. Sometimes at night he thought he could hear whispers carried on the wind. Words in a language older than the village, spoken softly and deliberately, calling his name without saying it. Anxiety gripped him. He could not tell whether he was chosen or cursed. Every sound, every movement felt amplified. Even a falling leaf sent his pulse racing. The ring's hum grew louder when he focused on it, as if responding to his heartbeat, his fear, his very life. By the end of the week, he understood one undeniable truth. The ring did not belong to him in the ordinary sense. It belonged to something larger, something invisible and powerful. And it had chosen him. That realization both terrified and exhilarated him. He was no longer just a boy surviving on scraps of porridge. He was part of a story that reached beyond the village, beyond the hills, beyond the river he had always known. The weight of it settled on his shoulders. He felt small, unworthy, and overwhelmed, yet there was a spark of pride buried in the fear, a fragile hope that maybe he could rise to what was being asked of him. As night fell, he sat alone on the riverbank, the ring in his palm. The water reflected the stars above, and in that reflection, he could have sworn he saw a faint glow around the ring. He pressed it to his forehead, and a shiver ran through him, a connection deeper than anything he had felt before. The ring was alive, and it responded to him. For the first time, the boy felt that he was no longer invisible. Not to the village, not to the world, not to the forces that had moved silently around him for all these years. Something greater had found him. Something that had been waiting patiently for the right moment, for the right child, for him. The realization filled him with awe and dread in equal measure. He did not yet know what was required, but he understood this. His life would never be the same. The ring had chosen him. And he could no longer pretend it was an accident. The nights grew longer and heavier after he discovered the ring. Sleep brought no peace. Dreams were no longer gentle escapes but rivers of fire and shadow that carried voices older than the earth. He woke gasping, covered in sweat, and sometimes found his hands trembling as if the ring itself had woken him. One night, the boy dreamt he was standing at the edge of a great forest. The trees were impossibly tall, their branches reaching for a sky that shimmered like molten silver. He could hear whispers in the wind, soft and insistent, weaving through the leaves. At first he could not understand the words, but slowly they formed shapes in his mind. Images of people, faces weathered with grief or joy, strong and fragile all at once. The whispers belonged to them, the ancestors, those who had come before, those who had chosen and failed. He saw a boy much like himself, hunched with hunger, clutching a small trinket that gleamed in the sunlight. The boy faltered, afraid, and the shadows closed in. Then he saw a woman kneeling over a child, hands reaching for something beyond her grasp. Each vision carried a weight of sorrow and regret, of lives altered by choices made too soon or too late. He awoke trembling, the morning light slanting across his hut, and found the ring warm in his palm, humming faintly as if it had absorbed the energy of his dreams. He pressed it to his forehead and a shiver ran down his spine. He could sense the presence of those who had lived before him. Their gaze, heavy with expectation, bore down on him even in the quiet hours before dawn. The next days were filled with a growing unease. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing into his shoulders. The ring was no gift to be cherished lightly. It was a burden, passed through generations, given only to those the spirits deemed capable. Yet, here he was, a boy who had never had enough to eat, who had never been noticed, who had always been told he was nothing. Each time he tried to ignore it, the world reminded him. Leaves bent unnaturally toward him. Water in the river glimmered when he approached. The wind whispered and shifted, carrying voices only he could hear. Even the animals seemed to sense it, watching him with intelligence in their eyes that was almost human. One evening, the boy returned to the forest near the river. Moonlight spilled through the branches, silver and fragile. He knelt beside an old stone, worn smooth by centuries of rain, and held the ring against it. Images filled his mind again. Warriors, healers, and children, all struggling, all striving, all carrying burdens too great for their years. And at the center of every vision he saw the ring, moving from hand to hand, waiting for the right one to bear it. A deep sorrow settled in his chest. How could he, so small, so hungry, so untrained in the ways of the world, ever hope to carry what had been passed down through the ages? He felt unworthy, overwhelmed by the invisible weight of history pressing down on him. Then the whispers became clearer. Not words exactly, but emotions, feelings, warnings. The ancestors spoke of failure, the terrible cost of refusing destiny. They showed flashes of disaster. Villages lost, families broken, spirits unbalanced. Each vision ended with a quiet insistence. Do not refuse. Do not run. Fear curled around his heart like a living thing. What if he could not do it? What if the weight of the ring crushed him as it had crushed others before him? And yet, he could not deny the pull he felt. Something in him, his hunger, his quiet resilience, the way he had survived when no one else cared, resonated with the ring. The spirits had chosen him even if he did not yet understand why. That night, he sat beside the fire in his hut, the ring warm in his hand, staring at the shadows that danced along the walls. He imagined the countless hands that had held it before him, the lives it had touched, the destiny it had shaped. And he realized that destiny was not simply given. It demanded courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. A soft wind entered through the cracks in the walls, carrying the faintest whisper of a name he did not recognize. He pressed the ring to his chest, and for the first time he felt a connection, a thread linking him to something greater than hunger, greater than fear, greater than the village that had always ignored him. The boy's heart beat rapidly. He understood, in a way that no words could convey, that the ring was not a treasure, not a prize, not a reward. It was a responsibility. A burden that would test him, shape him, and demand more than he had ever given. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and uncertainty, a spark of determination glimmered. He might be poor. He might be young. He might be small. But if the ancestors had chosen him, then he could not run. He could not hide. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around him like the wind through the forest, guiding, warning, and calling him forward. He felt the weight of the past, the presence of the unseen, and the inevitability of what was to come. Destiny was no longer a shadow at the edge of his life. It was waiting, patient and unyielding, and it had already found him. The boy clutched the ring tightly, pressing it to his forehead once more. His lips moved, though no words emerged. He did not need to speak. The spirits had heard him. And he knew, in the deepest part of his soul, that the path ahead would demand everything: fear, courage, and sacrifice. The river outside flowed silently in the moonlight, reflecting the first glimmers of a future that had already begun. The days that followed were heavy with unease. The boy tried to live as if nothing had changed. He returned to his work in the village, carrying water and sweeping yards, helping where he could, just as he had before. He tried to ignore the ring, hiding it beneath his shirt, burying it under the loose floorboard, even tossing it into the river one early morning. But no matter where he placed it, the ring seemed to find its way back into his hands, warm, insistent, alive. Fear gnawed at him like a relentless rat. He did not want this power. He did not want the responsibility that whispered from the metal band, calling him, claiming him. He longed for a life of simplicity, for hunger to be the only struggle he had to endure. But the world had shifted, and nothing would allow him to return. The ring's presence began to affect the village in ways he could not control. Animals froze when he approached, their eyes glowing with an intelligence that made his heart pound. Shadows seemed to move unnaturally at the edge of his vision. Leaves bent toward him as if acknowledging his passing. Even the air carried a weight he could not name. He tried to tell himself it was imagination, the mind playing tricks on a hungry, tired boy, but deep down he knew the truth. The world itself had begun to react to him. Panic started to root itself in his chest. What if he was cursed, not chosen? What if this burden was too heavy for him? His nights grew restless, haunted by dreams of failure. He saw villages burned, rivers drying, children crying for help he could not give. Faces appeared in the smoke and shadows, accusing, pleading. Each vision left him trembling and gasping for air, unsure if he could bear the weight of what the ring demanded. In his desperation he tried to run from it. He left the village one morning, walking aimlessly into the hills beyond the river. He wanted to escape the whispers, the visions, the eyes he felt upon him at every moment. He wanted to throw the ring into a deep cave or bury it in the earth where no one, not even the spirits, could find it. But as he walked, every step seemed heavier than the last. The earth itself resisted him, stones rolling underfoot, winds pushing against him. The ring's hum grew louder in his pocket, vibrating through his bones, refusing to be ignored. Tears filled his eyes as he sank to the ground on a slope overlooking the valley. "I don't want this," he cried into the empty air. "I'm just a boy. I'm not strong, I'm not worthy. Leave me alone." The wind carried a faint whisper in response. It was not cruel, but it was insistent. "You cannot run. You were chosen. You must bear it." He shook his head violently. The words felt like chains wrapping around his heart. He did not want chains. He did not want destiny pressing on him like a stone he could never lift. Yet the ring pulsed in his hand, warm and insistent, as if reminding him of something he could not deny. Misfortune began to follow him like a shadow. Small accidents, like tripping on stones or dropping precious water, turned dangerous. Illness crept into his body, making his limbs ache and his head pound. Friends and neighbors looked at him differently, uneasily, as though they could sense the shift in him, though they did not understand it. Even the animals avoided him now, sensing the tension and fear that radiated from his trembling body. The boy's heart sank. Each misstep, each failure, made him feel cursed rather than chosen. He wanted to scream, to strike the world, to tell it that he did not ask for greatness, that he did not want it. But the ring would not allow him to forget. It was a living reminder that something larger than himself had claimed him. One night, lying on the cold earth beneath the stars, he felt the ring grow heavy, almost unbearably so, as if it were a weight pressing into his soul. The whispers in the wind became clearer, urgent. He saw flashes of the past, children who had failed, young warriors who had fallen under the burden of choice. He realized that the ring did not just demand strength, it demanded courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. And he feared he had none of these. The weight of it nearly broke him. He curled into himself, clutching the ring, feeling tears slip silently down his cheeks. The world seemed immense, indifferent, and he so small, so fragile. Hunger had always been his enemy, but this was something different. This was destiny itself, and it was relentless. For the first time, he truly understood the price of ignoring what had been placed in his hands. A misstep, a refusal, a single moment of weakness, any of them could bring ruin not only to him, but to those he loved and those he would never meet. Fear, shame, and despair coiled inside him tighter than ever before. He wanted to run, to hide, to undo the choice he had never made. And yet, in the deepest part of his heart, a quiet, stubborn spark remained. He did not understand it yet. He did not trust it. But it whispered to him, "You are not alone. You are not weak." The boy shivered under the cold night sky. The river flowed silently nearby, reflecting the silver light of the moon. The ring pulsed in his hand, almost as if it were alive, echoing the rhythm of his heartbeat. He looked at it and realized, with a mixture of terror and awe, that he could not escape what had been chosen for him. The world had already marked him. The spirits had chosen him. And no amount of fear, no act of rejection, could undo what was already set in motion. With a trembling hand, he held the ring against his chest and whispered into the night, not words of understanding, not yet, but the first seed of acceptance. "I do not know if I am ready, but I cannot run." The morning air was cool and still as the boy stepped out of his hut, the ring hidden beneath his shirt but pulsing faintly against his chest. Hunger had returned, gnawing at his stomach, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing on his heart. He did not know where he was going, only that the world itself seemed to pull him toward a place he had never seen. The path led him through the edge of the forest, past the river that had always been a quiet witness to his life. The trees were tall and dark, their leaves whispering secrets he could not yet understand. He walked slowly, senses alert, feeling the faint pull of the ring guiding him forward. Each step made the air around him hum, and he knew that this was no ordinary journey. He reached a clearing bathed in pale sunlight, and there waiting were the spirits. They were not like humans, though they wore shapes he could recognize, tall, shadowy figures with eyes that glimmered like stars, faces both kind and fierce. They did not speak, but he felt their presence pressing down on him, demanding attention, demanding courage. One of the spirits stepped forward, and in that moment the boy understood. This was his trial. He would not be tested with force or weapon, but with something far greater, the measure of his heart. Before him lay a small child, barely older than he had been when he first began to feel the ache of hunger. The child was trapped beneath a fallen tree, struggling weakly, crying for help. Beside the boy was a small basket of food, enough to save him from days of hunger, and beyond that, a path that led safely out of the forest. The choice was clear. He could take the food for himself, escape the trial, protect himself from suffering. Or he could risk hunger, effort, and perhaps danger to help the child. The boy's chest tightened. Hunger screamed in his belly, demanding relief. The easy path beckoned, promising safety, warmth, and a small comfort he had not felt in weeks. Every instinct told him to leave the child, to think only of himself. But then he saw the child's face, small, frightened, trusting. The crying eyes reminded him of the days he had gone without food, the nights he had cried alone in the dark. He remembered the faces of those who had ignored him, the loneliness he had carried like a heavy stone. And in that moment, something deep inside him stirred, a spark of empathy, of courage, of the quiet strength that had kept him alive all these years. He dropped to his knees beside the child. The tree was heavy, its branches rough against his hands, but he pushed and lifted, grunting with effort. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with tears, but he did not stop. His body ached, his hunger screamed, yet he refused to leave until the child was free. When the child scrambled to safety, the boy felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. The ring, hidden beneath his shirt, pulsed brighter, vibrating in harmony with his heartbeat. It was as if the spirits themselves recognized his choice, acknowledging that courage and compassion mattered more than hunger, more than fear, more than survival. The child looked at him with wide eyes, trembling but alive. And for a brief, shining moment, the boy understood what the ring had meant when it had chosen him. Not power, not glory, not escape from suffering, but responsibility, the strength to act rightly even when it is hardest. The spirits circled silently, their presence calm and approving. He did not hear words, but he felt their pride, their relief, their expectation. The trial had been passed not by strength of body, but by strength of heart. Exhausted, he sank to the ground, the child safe beside him. Hunger still tore at him, but it no longer felt unbearable. He had learned something far greater. Poverty and weakness did not define him. His choices did. His courage did. His compassion did. The sunlight shifted, bathing the clearing in golden light. The ring glowed faintly beneath his shirt, warm against his chest. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a promise that he had begun to understand the path he was on. There would be more trials, more fear, more temptation. But for the first time he felt capable of facing them. As he rose, the child clung briefly to his hand, and the boy realized that his actions, small and personal though they might seem, could change lives. The ring had chosen him not to dominate, not to escape, but to guide, to protect, to bear a responsibility that reached far beyond himself. He walked back toward the village slowly, exhausted but awakened. The forest behind him was silent again, the trial complete, but the weight of destiny had not lifted. It had shifted, settling differently now. He was no longer a boy running from fate. He was a boy beginning to understand it. And somewhere deep within him, the ring pulsed softly, alive, patient, waiting for the next moment when courage would be needed. The boy returned from the forest, his body sore and his hands still trembling from the effort of the trial. The child he had saved ran ahead to the village, laughing and shouting, oblivious to the lessons hidden in that morning's struggle. He stayed behind for a moment, leaning against a tree trying to make sense of what had just happened. The ring pulsed faintly beneath his shirt, warm and insistent. He pressed it against his chest, feeling its subtle vibration. He knew, deep in his soul, that this object was far more than a piece of metal. It had chosen him, yes, but why? And what did it truly want? That night, sleep came reluctantly. The boy drifted into a dream, one that felt different from the visions that had haunted him before. This time, the world shifted around him with clarity. He was no longer in the forest or the village. He stood on a vast plain, the sky above dark and endless, yet streaked with sparks of gold and silver. Shapes moved across the horizon, shadows of those who had held the ring before him. He saw warriors who had sought power, their eyes fierce but empty. They had failed. He saw healers who had wanted only to help, yet had faltered when fear overwhelmed them. Children like him had held it and turned away. Each life was a story of courage and failure intertwined, and at the center of every story the ring glowed faintly, awaiting the next bearer. The whispers came again, clear and insistent this time, not words but understanding. The ring was a bridge between worlds, human and spirit, past and present. Its purpose was not to grant wealth, nor strength, nor fame. It existed to maintain balance. When one who bore it chose wisely, harmony spread. When one faltered, chaos followed. The boy's chest tightened. He thought of the moments he had tried to run, the fear that had nearly broken him. The weight of the ring was not punishment, it was expectation. It demanded courage, compassion, and wisdom, qualities that few truly possessed. And now it had chosen him. Images of those before him returned, more vivid than ever. Faces of children and adults, heroes and failures, all illuminated by the faint glow of the ring. He saw the consequences of ignoring destiny, villages abandoned, rivers dried, spirits lost. The cost of refusal was immense. And the ring, patient and enduring, had waited for someone like him, a boy who had known hunger, loneliness, and suffering, yet had survived without losing his heart. When he awoke, the world seemed sharper, more alive. The stars outside his hut were brilliant, the river gleaming with silver light. He touched the ring, feeling warmth, life, and urgency. It was a living thing tied not just to him but to the world itself. Its energy resonated with his heartbeat, his breath, his very being. He understood now that being chosen was not a reward, it was a responsibility. The ring would demand his best self, would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. It would force him to confront fear, hunger, betrayal, and despair. Yet, if he bore it with courage, he could do more than survive. He could protect lives, guide spirits, and maintain balance that stretched beyond the village, beyond the mountains, beyond the river itself. A wave of grief washed over him. The boy realized he could never return to the life he had known. Childhood, in its simplicity, was gone. Hunger and poverty had shaped him, yes, but now he carried something far greater, a destiny that would change everything. There was no turning back. He rose and stepped outside. The night air was cold, but the weight of understanding filled him with strength. He looked at the river, the forest, the distant hills, and knew that every trial, every fear, every challenge would shape him into the person he needed to become. The ring's glow beneath his shirt was steady now, a quiet pulse of reassurance. He thought of the child he had saved, of those he had yet to meet, of the spirits waiting for guidance. The boy realized that the ring did not merely test him, it empowered him. It had chosen him not for power or glory, but because he had the heart to bear the impossible and act rightly when fear threatened to overwhelm him. Memories of his past struggles came back, nights without food, days ignored by the village, moments of despair. And he understood that they had prepared him. Every pang of hunger, every whisper of loneliness, every small act of quiet courage had shaped him for this moment. He was not merely surviving, he was learning. He was becoming worthy. The ring pulsed again, stronger this time, as if acknowledging his understanding. He placed it on the small finger of his hand, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for him all along. The warmth spread through his palm, up his arm and into his chest. It was not comfort, it was a call to action, a promise of trials yet to come, and a reminder of the duty he had accepted. He knelt beside the river, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. He whispered to the wind, to the spirits, to the ancestors he had glimpsed in dreams, "I understand. I accept. I will bear what must be borne." The world seemed to pause as if acknowledging the boy's choice. The wind stilled for a moment, the river flowed without sound, and even the leaves in the nearby trees held their breath. The boy felt the presence of those who had walked this path before him, and for the first time he did not feel alone. Acceptance did not erase fear, but it gave him purpose. The boy knew that the ring's true power was not in what it could do for him, but in what he could do for the world. Every decision, every act, every sacrifice would matter. And he understood that he could no longer be a boy who simply survived, he had to be someone greater, someone strong in heart and spirit. As the first light of dawn touched the river, the boy rose, the ring pulsing gently on his finger. He did not know all that lay ahead, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not run. He would bear the burden, face the trials, and act with the courage and compassion that the spirits had chosen him for. The journey of fear, resistance, and doubt had ended. A new chapter had begun. The boy, once hungry and unseen, was now a bearer of legacy, a protector of balance, and a child of destiny. And the ring, ancient, wise, and alive, had found its rightful keeper. The boy returned to the village with a sense of purpose he had never known. The ring rested warm on his finger, pulsing faintly as if alive, a quiet reminder of the responsibilities he had accepted. For the first time he walked among the villagers with confidence, though still careful, still wary. He understood that the power he carried was not to be flaunted, it was to be used wisely, silently, and cautiously. But the world of humans is not like the world of spirits. Humans are tempted by desire, greed, and ambition, and they notice what they want most in the most vulnerable hearts. It began subtly. Whispers followed him through the streets. Eyes lingered, curious and calculating. Some villagers seemed friendlier than before, offering small gifts, food, or advice. The boy sensed something wrong but could not yet name it. He tried to ignore the unease, focusing instead on helping where he could, saving those who needed him just as the ring demanded. One afternoon an older boy approached him. He had once been a friend, someone he had shared small joys and meals with, someone he had trusted. The older boy spoke kindly, asking about the ring, asking if he could see it. Hesitation gripped the boy's heart. He knew better than to show it, yet something in the other boy's eyes, the familiar glint of friendship, made him almost relent. "Please," the older boy said softly. "I can help you. Together we can make things better." The boy wanted to believe him. Hunger, poverty, and fear had taught him to trust sparingly, yet he hesitated. He placed the ring in his palm, feeling its warmth, feeling the quiet hum that told him to be careful. Still he could not resist a small gesture of trust. That trust was broken. The older boy's eyes hardened the moment the ring touched his fingers. Greed flared like a fire, raw and bright. He had seen the power in the ring, glimpsed the pull it had on the world, and in that instant he no longer cared for friendship or loyalty. He grabbed the ring with both hands, trying to wrench it from the boy's grasp. The boy struggled, but the older boy was strong. The ring pulsed violently as if it were alive, resisting the force. A sharp vibration ran through the boy's arm, searing his skin, reminding him of the power it carried. The struggle ended with the older boy stumbling backward, shaken but not defeated. He fled into the village, shouting to anyone who would listen that the boy had a treasure, a source of unimaginable power. Panic swept through the village like wildfire. People who had ignored him before now approached with cautious curiosity. Some were kind, but others were not. They saw the ring as a means to wealth, influence, or control. The boy could feel the tension in the air, the weight of human greed pressing down upon him. He tried to explain that the ring was not theirs to take, that it carried responsibilities far beyond ordinary life. But words fell on deaf ears. Desire blinded them. Fear and ambition twisted their intentions. He realized, with a sinking heart, that humans could be more dangerous than spirits, more threatening than the trials he had faced alone in the forest. That night, he hid the ring beneath his mattress, but the weight of betrayal did not leave him. Sleep came fitfully, filled with visions of what might happen if the ring fell into the wrong hands. He saw chaos, fires, floods, sickness, despair. Each vision carried the same warning: the ring must be protected or lives would be lost. When he awoke, he knew he could not rely on others. Trust was fragile, even among those he had once called friends. The world of humans demanded caution, vigilance, and wisdom. The ring pulsed in his hand as if reminding him of this truth. His journey would not only test his courage, his compassion, and his strength, but also his judgment in discerning friend from foe. Days passed, and the threat of betrayal lingered. The boy moved quietly, careful with whom he shared his presence. Even those who appeared kind were watched closely. He learned to read subtle cues: hesitation in a glance, greed in a smile, hunger for power behind polite words. Each lesson was painful, each misstep costly, and yet he endured, growing stronger and more aware with every encounter. The older boy returned once more, cunning now, his intentions clearer. He tried to manipulate others, to turn the village against the boy. He promised wealth, protection, and comfort in exchange for the ring. The villagers, tempted and fearful, wavered. Some followed the older boy, leaving the boy alone in a sea of suspicion. The boy felt a storm inside him: anger, grief, fear, but he did not let it rule him. He pressed the ring to his chest, feeling the warmth, the hum, the quiet insistence that strength comes not from violence or deceit, but from patience, courage, and moral clarity. He realized that betrayal was part of the path. Humans, unlike spirits, could be unpredictable, selfish, and cruel. Yet the ring had chosen him for this very reason, to face challenges not only from the unseen world but from the hearts of those he would meet. He had survived hunger and fear, now he would learn to survive betrayal. By nightfall, the village was quiet, and the boy sat alone, the ring glowing faintly beneath his shirt. He understood that the trials of the living could wound more deeply than any trial of the spirits. Trust, once given, could be twisted, loyalty, once assumed, could falter. Yet he also knew that forgiveness, wisdom, and restraint could heal more than anger ever could destroy. The ring pulsed in his hand, steady now, as if to reassure him that he had the strength to endure. Betrayal was not the end, it was another step in the path he had chosen. Another test of heart, another measure of courage. And deep inside, beneath the fear, beneath the grief, the boy felt something he had not felt before: resolve. He would protect the ring. He would face those who sought it. He would endure the cruelty and greed of humans, just as he had endured hunger and loneliness. For the first time he understood the true scope of his destiny. The ring had chosen him not just to survive trials of spirits, but to navigate the treacherous, unpredictable world of humans. And he would not fail, not now, not ever. The boy had never felt so alone. Betrayal from those he had trusted, the weight of the ring, and the unrelenting pull of destiny pressed down on him like a storm. The village, once familiar, felt alien. Faces once kind were now cold, whispers followed him, and even the river seemed to flow with a strange, mocking rhythm. He wandered through the streets at night, the ring hidden in his palm, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat he could not escape. Sleep offered no respite. Dreams twisted into visions of despair. He saw villages in flames, rivers drying into cracked earth, children crying for help he could not give. Faces of those who had failed before him appeared, warriors, healers, children, each a silent accusation, a reminder of what could happen if he faltered. Anger flared within him, sharp and bitter. Why him? Why had the spirits chosen a boy so small, so weak, so unworthy? He wanted to scream, to strike, to reject the destiny that had been thrust upon him. His hands clenched around the ring, and for a fleeting moment he imagined the power it could give him. The ability to strike those who had betrayed him, to punish those who had doubted him, to bend the world to his will. And yet, he felt the pull of the whispers, the quiet insistence that true power did not come from destruction. The ring's warmth pulsed through him, a reminder that temptation was not victory and cruelty was not strength. He shivered, the conflict raging inside him, a storm that seemed impossible to survive. He left the village before dawn, walking alone into the hills, the wind sharp against his face. He felt the weight of his failures pressing him down. Hunger, fear, betrayal, exhaustion, all of it combined into a despair that made every step a battle. The ring pulsed, steady but insistent, as if sensing the turmoil in his heart. Hours passed. He found himself at the edge of the forest, the trees silent and dark. Shadows stretched unnaturally, whispering in languages older than the world. He sank to the ground beneath an ancient tree, burying his face in his hands. The ring's pulse pressed against his palm, a heartbeat he could not escape, echoing the tension in his own chest. Alone in the darkness, he confronted the truth of his situation. The ring had chosen him not only to face fear, hunger, and betrayal, but also to confront the darkness within himself. He could wield its power for vengeance. He could give in to anger. He could let fear guide his hand. And the consequences would be catastrophic. Tears flowed freely down his face. The boy felt the depth of his loneliness, the enormity of responsibility, the weight of potential failure. He imagined everything he could lose, those he had saved, the lives that depended on him, even himself. The temptation to surrender, to escape, to give in to despair, was almost irresistible. Then, faintly, he heard it, a whisper in the wind, softer than any voice he had known, but unmistakable. Mercy, courage, compassion. The words were not commands, they were a lifeline, a reminder of the path he had begun to walk. The ring pulsed in his hand, not with warning or fear, but with quiet approval. It had not abandoned him. He had not failed. Not yet. He lifted his head and looked around the dark forest. The shadows seemed less threatening now, the wind less oppressive. He understood, in a way he had never understood before, that this night of despair was a trial itself. It was the crucible through which he would forge his inner strength, the final test before he could truly bear the responsibilities of the ring. Hours stretched into the first light of dawn. The boy remained beneath the ancient tree, the ring warm against his chest, guiding him through the storm within. He did not feel victorious, nor strong, nor complete. He felt raw, vulnerable, and human, but he also felt a glimmer of something greater: resolve. He rose slowly, brushing the dirt and leaves from his worn clothing. The ring's pulse matched his heartbeat, a steady reminder that he was not alone. The spirits had not abandoned him. The trials were not over, but he had faced the darkest part of his own soul and survived. That survival, fragile and trembling though it was a victory in itself. The forest around him seemed to acknowledge his choice. Leaves rustled gently, the river beyond shimmered with the first light of morning, and a faint warmth lingered in the air. The boy realized that mercy, self-control, and patience were as important as courage and strength. Power without discipline would destroy him. Restraint and wisdom would guide him. He pressed the ring to his forehead, whispering softly, "I choose mercy. I choose courage. I choose to endure." The weight of despair began to lift, replaced by a fragile but steady confidence. He knew the path ahead would be difficult. There would be more trials, more betrayal, more fear. But he also knew that he had faced the deepest darkness within himself and emerged still capable of choice, still capable of action. For the first time he felt a quiet sense of balance. The ring hummed softly, almost like a sigh of approval, acknowledging the boy's growth. The shadows had not disappeared, the world had not grown easier, but he had learned the most important lesson. True strength was measured not by force, but by the courage to face one's own fears, the wisdom to resist temptation, and the mercy to choose rightly even when it is hardest. As he stepped from the forest into the rising sun, the boy carried with him the weight of all he had endured. He was still young, still hungry, still human, but he was no longer lost. The darkness of his soul had been faced, and he had survived. And the ring, ancient and powerful, pulsed gently against his chest, a constant reminder that he was ready to continue the journey he had been chosen for. The world trembled. It began quietly at first, shadows stretching unnaturally, winds that carried whispers of unease, and rivers that rippled with anger rather than calm. The boy felt it immediately, the deep thrum of imbalance, a vibration in the air that made the hairs on his arms rise. The ring pulsed violently beneath his shirt, warm, insistent, alive, as if aware of the crisis before him. The spirits appeared at the forest's edge, more numerous than he had ever seen. They were restless, agitated, their shapes flickering between light and shadow. Something had gone wrong. The balance between the human world and the spirit world was tipping, and he could feel the tension pressing into his chest. He did not need words to understand. This was the final test. The culmination of everything he had endured. The hunger, the trials, the betrayal, the nights of despair. The ultimate convergence demanded wisdom, courage, and sacrifice. The boy clenched the ring tightly, its pulse matching the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The village below was in chaos. Humans, driven by fear and greed, had begun to take advantage of the spiritual imbalance. Storms erupted without warning, fires leapt along the hillsides, and the earth itself seemed to rebel. Villagers screamed, scrambling to protect their homes and families, powerless against forces beyond their understanding. The boy ran toward the village, guided by the ring and the whispers of the spirits. He could see the destruction in their eyes, the panic, the confusion. He could see how fragile the world was when left unbalanced, when the connection between human and spirit realms was threatened. And he knew that if he failed, all that he had learned, the lessons of courage, sacrifice, and compassion, would be for nothing. At the village's center, the source of the disturbance revealed itself. A great rift had opened in the earth, a shadowy void that writhed with restless energy. From it spilled creatures of darkness, spirits twisted by the imbalance, their forms grotesque and frightening. They clawed at the edges of the village, seeking to consume all life in their path. The boy felt fear, raw and immediate, but he did not falter. He remembered the lessons of the ring, the first trial, the nights of despair, and the guidance of the ancestors. Power was not in force or domination. It was in understanding, compassion, and sacrifice. He raised his hands, the ring glowing brightly now, alive with the energy of countless generations. The creatures recoiled as he stepped forward. The boy did not strike them, did not fight them with anger or cruelty. Instead, he reached out with his heart, willing them to understand, to see balance, to return to the harmony they had once known. His voice was silent, yet the power of his will resonated through the rift, the village, and the spirits alike. The rift trembled and pulsed, responding to the boy's presence. Shadows twisted, and for a moment, it seemed as if the creatures would overwhelm him. Doubt clawed at his mind, but he pressed the ring to his chest, feeling its warmth and hearing its quiet hum. The lessons of mercy, courage, and moral strength filled him. He could not fail, not now, not ever. He stepped closer to the rift, extending his hands. The creatures hesitated, sensing the purity of his intent, the selflessness in his heart. The boy did not command them, he guided them. Slowly the shadows began to retreat, drawn back into the void, which shrank and shimmered with light as balance returned. The winds calmed, the fires subsided, and the rivers flowed gently once more. The spirits gathered around him, their forms luminous and serene. They bowed, not with servility but in acknowledgement of his triumph. The boy realized then the depth of his journey. He had faced hunger, betrayal, fear, and despair. He had endured the darkest moments of his own soul. And now he had acted as the bridge, not by force, but by understanding, by wisdom, and by courage. A final glow emanated from the ring, enveloping the boy in warmth. He felt the connection between spirit and flesh, between human and world, solidify in a single, unbreakable thread. Balance was restored, but he knew the cost. The ring's energy had drawn deeply from him, leaving him exhausted, drained, yet alive. He had given everything, not for glory, not for reward, but because it was necessary. The villagers, now safe, looked on in awe and fear. They did not understand what had happened, could not comprehend the forces at play, but they sensed the presence of something extraordinary. And the boy, though he appeared small and tired, carried the weight of countless generations, of every trial and lesson he had endured. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily, the ring cool now but still warm enough to remind him of its presence. The spirits circled him once more, whispering their approval, acknowledging the growth, the endurance, and the moral courage that had guided him. The convergence was complete. The worlds were balanced. Yet he understood the truth. This victory was not without cost. Childhood had slipped away, innocence lost, and the burdens of destiny etched into his heart forever. The ring had fulfilled its purpose, but he would carry its lessons, its weight, and its responsibility for the rest of his life. As dawn broke over the village, the boy rose slowly, the light catching on the ring, glimmering like a star. He had faced the ultimate trial, bridging spirit and flesh, human and world, fear and courage. And though his path was far from over, he now understood the depth of what it meant to be chosen. The river ran quietly once more, reflecting the light of a world restored. The boy, small yet unyielding, walked through the village, not as a child anymore, but as a protector, a bridge, a bearer of balance. The ring pulsed gently, no longer demanding, no longer heavy, but alive, patient, and ready for the next chapter of a journey that would continue long after this day.